Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 689, written by Usarina16. A glitch of crumpled metal. I was 17, I'm 34 now, dating a boy named Alex from high school, and he asked me if I wanted to cheer him on at a Magic the Gathering tournament. It was supposed to run from 8 to midnight, and my dad told me to be home by 12:30. The tournament ran too late. It was 2 a.m. before it ended. I finally turned on my phone and was immediately called by my irate father to get home now and that I was grounded. My boyfriend was pissed despite winning his tournament at being rushed. He drove erratically down the street and was running stop signs and even a red light. I saw headlights as we ran through. I heard the screech of the tires and even the crumple of the metal. I was meant to die in that crash. I braced myself hard and closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, we were through the intersection and not a scratch on the car. I got home, threw Alex under the bus and thanked my dad for his anger as it unleashed careless behavior from my then boyfriend. I broke up with him shortly after, as he never admitted his behavior was reckless. Case file number 690, written by Weird News 3634. They seemed normal, but they weren't human. So I'm not exactly a paranormal believer per se, but I've had a couple of experiences while hunting or hiking that I just can't explain rationally. The most unnerving one happened probably 7 or 8 years ago. Normally, I'd hunt on some property that my family owns. I don't even remember the reason anymore that I decided to hunt on public land this time. Probably just a change of scenery. I remember that it was evening in fall, but it was a fairly uncharacteristically warm day. I got to the access road and pulled off to the spot where everyone pulls off to park and walk in, and noticed there were a couple of old boys already there. Nothing too weird about them, except there is no truck or vehicle for them to have pulled in on. They also didn't have guns with them, but they were dressed in hunter orange. But at the time, I just figured that they were backpackers or campers. There's not too far from this spot than a campground, and it's not uncommon for folks to spend weekends away from their family for some peace and quiet for their hunting trip. Anyways, they seemed friendly enough, and there was absolutely nothing said to make them seem any different than hundreds of other fellows I've met while hunting. They were just a couple of hillbillies from the sounds of it. We shot the crap for a couple of minutes. They took off, and I sat on my phone for a bit, trying to give them a head start, because I was afraid they'd drive off the squirrels. Except I clearly didn't wait long enough. Probably like 10 minutes up the trail, it curved to the left, but I heard noises coming directly from ahead. It sounded bigger than a squirrel, but I also like seeing any sort of animal, and it didn't sound too far off the main path. When I crept off the path, the ground started to drop, so I was able to look down and see my new pals, but not acting right at all. This is going to be hard to explain without a visual, but they weren't just moving like normal people. Their movements were jerky, and it's almost like they'd forgotten that things like knees and other joints were able to bend. They were more rigid than I can describe. I didn't stick around long, because frankly it was freaking terrifying. I backed away slowly and quietly to the trail, and then hauled my butt back to my car. I've spoken with several of the more open-minded outdoorsmen in the area, and none of them have ever heard of anything like that. Drugs were the most common theory that I've heard, and I know that's a logical assumption, but man, I've seen folks on a lot of different drugs and those movements just look too scarily unnatural. I've done some Googling in the years since for similar incidents in my area, but I've yet to find anything that sounds like this. How could human beings be that rigid? It's impossible. Case notes, file number 690. They weren't human. Finally, it's been a while since I had a case where I can really say, this is aliens, definitely. And if you give it a few moments of thought, it's not inconceivable that aliens would have the technology to basically construct meat suits, for lack of a better word, of human beings and inhabit them, either by transferring their consciousness into the body, or just building a body that mimics it and they control it from afar. So it's sort of like a Terminator robot thing. And it's not inconceivable because any aliens capable of reaching us, either from another solar system or from another higher dimension, would be so far beyond us in technology, it's almost incomprehensible. It'd be like trying to imagine a color that doesn't exist. Oh, good luck with that. And why would they want to do that? Well, to study us. I'm reminded of a movie, Star Trek Insurrection, where they're trying to examine a lower species. They don't have warp capability, but they appear to be immortal. Interesting. And they just want to learn more about them, so they camouflage themselves into like a bunker in the side of a rock, and they're just observing this little town to see how they behave, their culture, how they think, how they talk, their language, and all that. In this case though, well, why would aliens limit themselves to one small geographic location when they could just build a body, inhabit it or remotely control it, and then live with us and really get the feel of who we are and how we live? Presumably if they're intelligent and not out to kill us, well, that's the whole purpose of studying. Unless you're trying to conquer, well, you just want to know who they are. It's what I would do if I had the technology, and we could actually explore other worlds and we found real life there, but wasn't quite advanced enough to interact with us on the same level. You still want to get to know them, even though you can't make your presence known, or at least not directly. But I do wonder, what were they doing alone in the forest? If they are indeed aliens, they obviously aren't hunting. Maybe they're just studying the wildlife, the vegetation. Maybe it's not just humans they're interested in. Maybe the planet, Earth, is more interesting and rare than we think. And maybe they're sort of caretakers for this planet and living things on it. I like that idea. It gives a new meaning to Guardian Angel. Maybe we need to rename it to Guardian Alien. Creepy file number 34. Written by Medium Ticket 9574. A Midday Abduction. I had been staying at a motel while on a business trip in Mobile, Alabama. One day, I decided to walk to Zaxby's for lunch. It was only a short distance across the street from the motel, near a pretty busy intersection, so a young woman felt pretty secure doing that in the middle of the day. As I was just exiting the hotel's parking lot, about to begin to cross the street, not in a crosswalk, I noticed an older-style rust-orange-colored, perhaps Chevy Chevelle, or maybe Oldsmobile Cutlass. Sorry, I don't really know old cars. Pulled into the empty parking lot across the street, exactly where I would have been heading if I stayed on my current trajectory. I remember thinking it was a weird place to park your car, because he had parked the vehicle only in the entrance of this empty parking lot, not in a parking spot. Then I noticed a tall, heavier-set man step out of the driver's seat and walk to the trunk, open the trunk, stand to the side of the open trunk, and just look at me as I'm getting closer and closing the distance between us. Every alarm bell in my body is going off in my head as a really bizarre thing he is doing. But at this point, I'm exactly halfway across the street in the middle of the road and realize I'm going to have to be the annoying one who very obviously changes her course to avoid walking any closer to this man. I decided I'd take the chance of looking like that person and immediately U-turn my body back to the motel side of the street. During this time of changing my direction, this man gets back into his car and pulls across the street directly in front of me and into the entrance of the motel parking lot that I'm about to pass and looks straight at me with his window about 2 inches down. After seeing the way he's looking at me, I very quickly change directions yet again and quickly walk back across the street and make a beeline for Zaxby's. Anyone watching would have witnessed me zigzagging across the street about 3 times if memory serves me. Anyway, I didn't get kidnapped, but I think that was his intention, and that was creepy as hell.